Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this virtual professional development opportunity from the Maine Department of Education. My name is Joe Schmidt, and I'm the Social Studies Specialist for the department. Today, I am happy and we are very lucky to have Mary Ellen Daniels, the Civics Instructionalist Specialist from the Robert McCormick Foundation as part of the Illinois Civic Mission Coalition here today. In Illinois, they've passed some laws. In 2015, it became a high school requirement, and in 2019, it became a middle school requirement to have courses specific in civic education. And during that time, Mary Ellen has been working as a professional leader throughout the state of Illinois to provide support for teachers in talking about civics. So with that all being said, I asked Mary Ellen to come speak to Maine because I don't know if there's a better person to talk about hands-on instruction. And when she said, can I talk about being a citizen during a pandemic? I said, you absolutely can. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mary Ellen Daniels.
Wow, Joe, that is quite the build-up for the presentation today. I'm really glad to be here. As Joe said, my name is Mary Ellen Daniels, and after 27 years in the classroom, the last few years I've spent providing professional development to teachers around the state of Illinois around a new first high school civics mandate and now a middle school civics mandate. So I've had a lot of opportunity to work with teachers in the field and to think a little bit about how we can really prepare our students for college, career, and civic life. And as Joe shared, all of the resources I'm going to make reference to today are in a Google Drive folder that I will share with you, including some ready-to-go resources that you can use with your students. So with that, let's get started. We're going to start with a little bit of a warm-up activity to get your brains in the game here. And this is a little activity I call two-box induction or find my rule. And what you do in this activity is I'm going to sort a number of statements into either category A or category B. And it's going to be your job to define the pattern. Why are some statements in A and others in B? Are we game? All right, I see a thumbs up and a nod, so here we go. So, category A, students participate in a prairie cleanup. Students rake leaves for seniors in the community. Students provide landscaping services for a Habitat for Humanity home. In column B, students serve as election judges. Students lobby for the need to have suffrage at 17 for primary elections. Now I'm going to pause right here and ask you to unmute your microphones and share with us, after just seeing these first 5 descriptors, what do you think the pattern is? Why are 3 of these things in A and the others in B?
One is for the environment and one is for the political.
Okay, environment versus political. Any other ideas?
Community service versus politics.
Okay, community service versus politics.
I was going to say that. Ooh.
Okay, 2 for that one.
I was going to say that, but I was going to say that B is also like activism.
Okay. My students, when I do this with them, they say column A are things where you sweat and B are things where you sit down. All right, so in the first round of Find My Rule or two-box induction, again, you give a couple of descriptors in each column and get some preliminary hypotheses from students as to what they think the pattern is. Let's add a few more items, as my grandmother in Wisconsin would say, to make the cheese more binding, okay? So let's add a few more here. Students testify in front of a legislative committee about the need for recycling in schools, column B. Students serve as peer tutors for freshmen in a study hall, column A. Students clean out their closet and donate items to Goodwill, column A. Students testify before a zoning board on a new subdivision's impact on fens, column B. So let's pause right here, and I would ask my students at this point, are there any descriptors you want to eliminate that you previously gave? And are there any more descriptors we can add to try to make sense of this pattern? Why are some in A, others in B?
I think one is physical and one is verbal.
Okay.
B is law reform.
Okay. If B is law reform, what would A be?
More like action.
Okay. All right. Now what we're going to do is test out some of your hypotheses. You're going to use your spidey senses for this next round, and I'm going to give you a descriptor, and you're going to tell me if it's an A or a B. All right? So students work with a community group to help citizens navigate FOIA laws. Do you think that's an A or a B?
A.
It's actually a B.
Oh.
That's all right, you got a couple more. Students conduct a survey about school climate and present their findings with policy recommendations to the school board.
B.
Yep. Students collect money for a local animal shelter.
A.
A.
A. Students volunteer to unpack food at a local food pantry.
A.
You guys are picking up what I'm laying down. Students collect toiletries for a veterans home.
A.
No moss grows under your tree here. Students volunteer to circulate a petition for a referendum on a new rec center in town.
B.
Yep, it's a B. It's a B. All right. Now, for this last round, what I would tell my students is I would ask them, instead of calling this A and B, what should we title these columns? And you could use some of the descriptors we previously talked about or come up with something new. So any guesses, or what would you title these columns? Instead of, yeah.
Action and B is policy.
Okay, A is action, B is policy. Any other ideas?
A, personal improvement. B is society improvement.
Okay. Any other ideas?
How about service versus civics?
Service versus civics. All right. Well, without further ado, I'm going to take you out of your misery. I don't want you guys to lose any sleep over this. All of these actions we just went over are really examples of informed action students can take through service learning. Column A represents actions that can be really taken in civil society. And these are actions that are taken by individuals, or as some of you said, more personal actions, or actions taken by groups within a community to meet the needs within a community. And often these actions are more short-term in nature, dealing with the symptoms of issues. Sometimes they're associated with volunteerism. They could be service learning if they're explicitly tied to the curriculum. So if the kids collect items for the veterans home because they've been studying issues involving veterans in class, it could be service learning because it's tied to the curriculum. Items in column B are more public policy actions students can take. These are actions taken by individuals to influence the institutions in a community to address issues. And these public policy issues are usually more sustainable solutions to problems, long-term solutions that really deal with the root causes of issues. And sometimes they're referred to as action civics or participatory civics. Now, I'm finding right now, working with teachers in the state of Illinois, we had a lot of momentum going around informed action through service learning. But with the current pandemic, a lot of teachers are really grappling with, how can I really give my students an opportunity to use their voice to really engage in authentic civic action? And when you think about civic action, one of the articles that really changed my perspective about all of this is an article that I read a few years ago by Joe Kahn and Joel Westheimer called What Kind of Citizen? And a copy of this is in your Google Drive folder if any of you would like to look at it a little bit later. And this is one of these articles for the psychology teachers in the room that gave me that gestalt light bulb moment where this is what's been missing in my practice. And let me just kind of give you the Spark Notes version of the article. So Joe and Joel, by the way, Joel Westheimer, son of Dr. Ruth Westheimer, the youngsters in the room, she was our generation's Drew Pinsky, okay? But anyways, oh, this is being recorded. I got to keep it down here. All right, so Joe and Joel basically looked at civic education programs around North America and kind of looked at how we were preparing students for civic life. And they sort of put what civic education looked like into 3 buckets. And they said, you know, most schools are doing a pretty good job helping students be what they call personally responsible citizens. This is through things like character counts programs, teaching kids to be responsible for their actions, you know, work hard, pay your taxes, recycle, volunteer in times of crisis. For example, kids that bring the obligatory can of green beans and sauerkraut to the holiday food drive, right? This is sort of like the personally responsible citizen. And then they said, you know, some schools go a little bit further and give kids an opportunity to be participatory citizens. And these are kids that organize the food drive. These are the kids that are active members within groups in the community, whether that be in a classroom, through athletics, through the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. And they really know about civil society institutions within your community and partner with them to make change. But Joel and Joel said the more rare type of civic education that really has huge impact is that last column, which is called the justice-oriented citizen. And these are the students that, because of the inquiry that you're doing in your social studies classroom, because of the essential questions that you're examining, no matter what you teach, whether it be civics, history, geography, or economics, these are the students that maybe in the middle of the holiday food drive raise their hand and say, you know what, Miss Spears, why do we need a food drive? Why are people hungry in our community? These are kids that really want to seek out and address areas of injustice to promote sustainable change. And that was the column that was really missing in my practice for many years as a social studies teacher. You know, I did a really great job, whether I was teaching history or geography or civics, having kids look at really rich, essential questions around justice, around freedom, around liberty, around personal responsibility. And I would take really great content, the past into the present. You know, like, let's look at the issue of women's rights in the past. Let's bring it into the present. Is there still injustice? Yes. You know, and I get the kids all sort of emotionally engaged in that. Or issues of poverty, past to the present. Is there still this inequity? Yes. The kids in Illinois sound like pirates when they get upset about injustice. So that's why, okay. And I get the kids all emotionally engaged in these essential questions. And then we take the test and move on. And what I saw was happening in my students is I was really sort of creating a cohort of cynics that were really good at pointing out problems in society, but I wasn't providing any agency for them to make any changes. And that's really where sort of these different types of citizens sort of come in. And a way that I look at it is, again, we have opportunities to engage our students in some of these civil society actions in the personally responsible and participatory citizen columns. And we have an opportunity to engage our kids in some public policy actions, like we see here in the justice-oriented citizen column. And when we combine these things together in our classrooms, whether in the physical school building or remote learning, we're helping kids become responsible and involved citizens per, I think I read that on your Illinois or the Maine Department of Education website as one of your guiding principles of education. Another way to think of this is, again, I did a really good job helping kids sort of take the temperature of issues in their community. they were doing a really good job being thermometers and taking the temperature. When we get our kids an opportunity to get civically engaged, to activate them, to have advocacy and activism and agency, we move them beyond just being thermometers that take the temperature of what's going on in their community and helping them become thermostats that can change the temperature in their community. See what I did there before 9 o'clock in the morning Chicago time? So thermometers to thermostats. Let's think about how we can give kids those opportunities to do civics. Look at those enduring issues in our classrooms and give them agency to make change. And I think this is even more important right now during this pandemic. A lot of us are feeling helpless. A lot of us are feeling victimized by some of the situations that are going on around us. What are some things that we can do to give the kids some agency to be thermostats in their community, even in the midst of a pandemic? Now, a lot of times when I talk to teachers in Illinois, and maybe because you have Joe Schmidt in Maine, you have a much better handle on this, but when I talk to teachers in Illinois about service learning or civic action, a lot of times their reaction is, gosh, Mary Ellen, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know how I'm going to afford the bus for the field trip, where I'm going to find the dirty park and get the little sticks for the kids to pick up the yucky stuff they find in the park. And I'm like, no. You're confusing civic engagement with court-ordered community service. And that's not what we're talking about here, right? When we talk about informed action ideas that our students can take during a pandemic or beyond, there are lots of different ideas for informed action here. And this is a list that a friend of mine, Joe Karb, began. He is a middle school teacher in New York. And then I've added to of informed action ideas. Looking at this list, what are some ideas here that you think students could take even in a remote learning environment during a pandemic? I'm just going to pause and have you unmute your microphones, and maybe you've already had your students do some of these things and you could share briefly. Which of these are doable, do you think, even in a remote learning environment?
The flyer, the song, the poster.
Yeah, I guess I should add TikTok videos up here, right?
Right, yeah. Informed conversation, press release.
Almost
Newspaper.
all of them.
photo.
Yeah, a lot of them can be done virtually. Again, at what better time to provide students with an opportunity to do these things, to respond to current situations? And again, this list is in an article I wrote called Thermometers to Thermostats, ironically, that's in your Google Drive folder, with some more resources of how you can support doing some of these things with your students. Now, when Joe asked me to do this webinar, I actually just wrote a blog post called What Kind of Citizen During a Pandemic, where I delve into this a little bit more. If you're interested in reading it, it's hyperlinked here on this slide. But I went back to and I'm going to minimize this right here. I'll bring your pretty faces back up in a minute. I went back to sort of that schematic that was created by Joe and Joel about what type of citizen. Again, the personally responsible, the participatory, and the justice-oriented citizen. And thinking through what are some opportunities for students during a pandemic to engage in each of these categories. You know, a lot of our kids are already being personally responsible citizens, and we need to celebrate that. Things like wearing masks, social distancing, practicing good hygiene, healthy habits, even some personal health and wellness routines like journaling about what's happening. These are all things we can encourage and are encouraging with our students to be personally responsible citizens. And that's important. And again, it's important to encourage that personally responsible behavior, even as we try to encourage that justice-oriented behavior. It's not like while we're examining the root causes of hunger, we stop feeding people. It's not an either or, It's a both and. Participatory citizens. I'm sure all of us have seen great news stories of students that are doing wonderful things, and maybe you know about this in your community, where they're checking on neighbors, they're sending well wishes to others, and especially first responders. Maybe they're even donating to those in need, or organizing virtual town halls or virtual check-ins, online to sort of meet those social emotional needs. And then, of course, the justice-oriented citizen, I think, is really important work for us as educators to engage in right now. We can have our students examine some of the root causes of issues around COVID-19, whether it be that distance learning challenges, access to services, the infodemic that we're experiencing right now with misinformation, and how can we be the solutions to some of those issues? Just to give you an example of something that is being done at my high school, the students have certainly been journaling, and teachers have been encouraging through bell ringers and other activities for students to kind of check in how they're doing right now during this, during the pandemic and being away from school. Sort of teachers are being encouraged to put Maslow before Bloom, right? And sort of encourage kids to be personally responsible. Well, one civics class actually last week decided what they wanted to do is have a virtual town hall. And they actually invited the principal and the school board to come in as listeners, as students were able to share and participate in this virtual town hall of some of the successes and challenges during the distance remote learning that they've been experiencing this semester. And as a result of that conversation, they're now really looking at some of the root causes of some of the challenges students are having and coming up with solutions of what the school district and what the local community and even what the state can do to sort of address some of those issues. So again, a lot of us are engaging our kids in journaling or engaging our kids in keeping the history of this time period to inform others in the future. But this work can be used to actually inform others right now. I'm going to pause here and just ask you, what are some things you're doing right now maybe? Are any of you doing anything to engage your students in sort of this sort of work during this pandemic, during this time period?
My kids have a choice board right now
Mm-hmm.
that they're working from, and some of those include writing a letter to our superintendent to let him know how they feel like it's going during the pandemic. Just something that basic to give them that permission to have contact with somebody who's just a figurehead to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, again, is informed action that is authentic. A lot of times when you think about civic participation, people think it has to be this big production and thing. And quite frankly, the type of civic action that they're realistically going to do as adults are things like writing an email to an elected official, engaging in that informed conversation, with that community member, thoughtfully resharing information on social media. And again, if we want them to do this, we need to give them the safe space to practice these sorts of habits. All right, well, how about some tools that maybe you can use to do this? What do you say? Let me try to give you 3 tools perhaps that you can use, and there's more in your Google Drive, to maybe help with this sort of work. Now, one of my favorite tools, and maybe you've seen this before, is what's called the root cause tree. And I actually have a video clip embedded in this PowerPoint that you can watch at a later time that kind of shows the root cause tree in action, and a root cause tree that you can use with your students. And what a root cause tree does is it's a really powerful tool for kids to think deeply about not only the symptoms of issues in their community, but also what are the root causes that we could address to sort of promote sustainable change. And one of the ways that I illustrate this to help my students understand this is actually using a issue that's very common, and that is the common cold. Every fall, common cold hits our classrooms, right? So I'll tell students, how do we know it's cold season? What are the symptoms of the common cold that kind of tip you off that, uh-oh, it's that time of year? So I'm just going to have you guys unmute your microphones. What are some of the symptoms of the common cold where it's hitting your classroom?
The gross noses.
Absence.
Yeah.
Sniffles.
Sniffles. It's like a Vicks 44 commercial right now.
Going through tissue boxes.
Yes. Miss Daniels has been known to steal rolls of toilet paper from the bathroom because she's tired of buying it at the store. I feel this is a safe space. Can I admit this here?
Of course.
Okay. All right. So the kids come up with all sorts of symptoms, like you just said. So again, the leaves on this tree represent the symptoms of a common cold. So maybe it's those runny noses, it's headaches, it's a sore throat, it's no tissue, it's sneezing in your classroom, right? So this is how we kind of know the common cold has hit. And then I'll ask students, why is it that every fall we have the spread of this common cold? What's happening below the surface of this tree? What are the roots that are causing this tree to bloom? So what are some of the things that you think kids identify as root causes of the common cold? Why does this happen and spread every year? Why do kids get sick with the common cold? Why does everybody get sick? What's going on?
It passes in germs because they're close.
Okay, I heard something about poor hygiene, I think, yes? Yeah?
Kids would say the change in weather.
Change in weather, absolutely. They're wearing shorts at 20 degrees below zero, right? Okay, what are some other root causes possibly? What makes kids and even us susceptible to get sick?
Being run down.
Exhaustion, yeah. I think someone else was at exhaustion as well that you were saying, Tammy, I think?
No, they become closed in. So they're
Yeah, right, closed in. Class sizes of 32 to 35. Probably not next fall, but yeah, big class sizes. So again, just to kind of show you for the sake of time, the kids might say things like germs, right? They're sneezing, they're not covering their mouth, germs. Nutrition, right? You would think the Flaming Hot Cheetos with squeezed cheese on it would, kill something in their system, but it doesn't give them the nutrients they need, right, to fight off disease. Some of you already said proximity, right? Being closed in, bad airflow. Stress, right? Being stressed out affects your immune system. And as you said, exhaustion, being tired, right? Now, let's go a step further. What is something for each of these root causes that maybe the school or administration could do to address each of these roots? Because again, if we want to kill this tree of the common cold, should we focus on the symptoms or the roots?
Offer healthy snacks.
Yeah, offering healthy snacks. And my students would go one more and say, Miss Daniels, I'd buy the salad, but it's $5. The macaroni and cheese is $1.25. So not only offering healthy snacks, but affordable healthy snacks, right?
In my middle school last year, the school actually provided free healthy snacks to the kids.
That's really great. They must have seen my root cause tree and gotten on this. What can we do about germs?
You could have enough time in the day to make kids actually wash their hands and teach them good hand washing habits.
Yeah. In my school, we would just like to have soap at the dispensers on Friday. For some reason, it runs out and they don't refill it until the weekend. So it's like no soap Friday. I'm a simple girl. I just want soap on Friday. So again, my students, just to give you some examples, for germs, they say, again, more soap, more sanitizer. For exhaustion, they would like to reinstitute the kindergarten nap time. And they got very excited when I said I taught in China and kindergarten through college, there's Soshi Isha, or nap time after lunch. They got very excited about the possibilities. Proximity, smaller class sizes. Stress, they suggested we ban homework. Nutrition, affordable, healthy lunches. Now, not all of these solutions are probably going to be picked up by administration, but again, it's a way for kids to brainstorm. Instead of just complaining about the symptoms, let's get to the root of this. What are the root causes of this issue? And what are some of the ways that we in civil society and some policies that could be passed by government agencies, what can they do to address these things? Okay? Now imagine if you use this root cause tree, Leslie, for example, with the issues surrounding distance learning before the kids wrote those letters to the superintendent. How much richer might those letters be? And sort of reflecting on their experience, what are the root causes? And okay, I'm not just complaining about this, and I'm not saying your kids did this, but here are some solutions we think we can do about this.
Beautiful graphic organizer. Great idea.
And it's in your Google Drive. You don't even have to make it, okay? Or my students have done this for school climate issues. How can we improve school climate? Or maybe after you do a civil rights unit, issues of injustice today. Or after you do things with women's suffrage, gender equity issues. Or if they're planning for something like affordable college, whatever it may be. You could even use this root cause tree to review causes of historical events, like the American Revolution. So it's a really handy tool that if it has been used with success, I think someone's unmuted that's talking to their kids, so if you want to, okay. Kindergartners can understand this, high school kids can understand this. Okay, so again, in the slide deck, there's actually a video, it's about 9 minutes long, of a teacher using the root cause tree with his students to kind of see how it works, if that would make you more comfortable using it, okay? So one tool down, I'm gonna try to get 2 more in under the wire. Does that sound good? All right. Now, we already shared that there's several different types of civic actions that we can take to address these root causes. And actually, Project Citizen has a really neat organizer to help students think through this. And I actually put this graphic organizer in your Google Drive folder for you to use. But let me just sort of, listen, I'm a full service person. You're my people here, okay? So listen, I'm not just gonna put these things out here and make you find them yourself, all right? 30 years in the trenches with you. It's in the Google Drive folder, okay? So what this is this is a chart that students can use after they've done the root cause tree. And in the middle of the chart, they can put root causes of an issue of concern for them. Maybe this fall, I think a lot of us are probably going to do things around voting and elections, and maybe issues around voter apathy. And maybe your students, after studying data and research, identify some of the root causes of voter apathy in their community. My students, as a matter of fact, surveyed their peers and others to kind of discern, if you don't vote, why is it that you don't vote? And here are a few of the root causes my students identified. Registration. In the state of Illinois, you need to register before you vote. So sometimes people show up on the polls on election day thinking they can vote, and they can't because they're not registered. Fear of the process. We have a lot of immigrants in my area. In some of the places they come from, voting is not safe. So there's this fear of the process, and also looking stupid, right? That I do this for the first time. Some just don't value the right to vote. They don't understand the sacrifices that were made for the right to vote. Maybe if they had that realization, they would vote. And then also lack of information on the candidates. So I just sort of showed you a couple of things my students brainstormed for a couple of these root causes. And actually there's an article about this written by Diana Hess that goes into a little bit more depth of what my students did in the Google Drive folder, if that's helpful to you, to kind of give you some inspiration. So for example, my students for registration, they said, you know what? Maybe we could reach out to the League of Women Voters and host a voter registration drive at homecoming. Kids are coming home from college and university. The community comes out for the homecoming game. We can hand out flyers, we can make announcements, and we can engage our community in voter registration. That's something they could do in civil society without permission from the government, and maybe deal with the registration process. What's a public policy action they could advocate for? Well, they found out in other states that there's same-day registration and motor voter registration. Maybe we could research that and write letters to our elected officials to advocate for that. So those are some actions they took. Fear of the process. They found out that our local League of Women Voters partnered with our election commission to have mock elections in schools about 2 months before the elections. That way the election commission can test out their equipment and the kids could have a realistic voting simulation. So that's something that we did, and we found out that many of our students interpreted the process for their parents at home. So they could go home and say, hey, it's not so scary. This is how it works. And in Illinois, we have a program where students 16 years of age and US citizens can actually serve as election judges. And if the kids serve as election judges as young, they're not so fearful of the process. Now, I have 2 more root causes listed there. I'm going to ask you to pause or unmute your microphone and maybe share what do you think are some actions students can do either in civil society or that they could advocate for to address those other root causes of voter apathy.
Maybe you could show them ways to become informed on the candidates and the issues and different sources to go to learn more about it.
Absolutely. And if we wanted to take that a step further, after they learn about it, what could they do for others in their community?
Share those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Pay it forward. You know, once you teach kids about the right to vote, suffrage, the way people sacrifice to get the right to vote, various groups, what could they do to inform others maybe in their community about the sacrifices so that they more value the franchise? What could kids do with that information? Maybe it starts with a P and ends with an essay. Yeah, you know, like create PSAs to inform the community, memes that they could share on social media about the importance of the franchise, how people sacrificed, use your right to vote, right? They could make TikTok videos or songs or other things to sort of get out the vote. And again, in the Google Drive are some of the lists, some of the ideas my students came up with. Actually, I think I have it on this slide right here. So again, here are the root causes they identified, and then some of the ideas for informed action. And I'll just pause right here for you to skim this before I show you one last tool. Let's do a little check-in. Are you guys getting some ideas of how you can help kids be civic participants during a pandemic and not beyond? Okay, good. Well, we're just going to keep that going. Again, my goal is for Joe to invite me back. And again, in your Google Drive folder, there's a couple of articles that sort of highlight how you could do this. There's one called Should Schools Teach Students to Vote? Yes. That sort of highlights what my students did, and this is a picture of their mock election. And then that idea of designing and assessing informed action where I talk about the root cause tree and such. Now, anyone familiar with the 5 whys technique? Yeah, a lot of us know about this from science and engineering. The 5 whys technique is a really quick and easy tool to use with your kids It was started actually by the founder of Toyota's father, which is a strategy where the kids keep asking why to really look, again, deeply at those root causes of issues. And again, this was created in sort of a factory setting. So for example, why is this machine stopped? The overload tripped out. Why did the overload trip out? There's insufficient oil. Why is there insufficient oil? The oil pump is inefficient. Why is the pump not efficient? The shaft is worn. Why is the shaft worn? The oil filter is blocked with swarf, which I looked up. It means gunk. Okay? So what's the root cause of the machine stopping? It's this gunk or swarf. All right? So a lot of times kids like to stop by just identifying the problem. And we need to give them a protocol to really look deeply at what is the root cause of this problem. And again, there isn't time right now, but if you want to go back through this slide deck, this is like a 3-minute video showing the 5 whys in action, dealing with an issue with the monuments in Washington, D.C. that really resonates with the kids when I show it to them. Let me give you a civic example of this. So maybe one of the problems we're talking about with our students right now is the fact that, and maybe this is just happening in Illinois and isn't happening in Maine, but there's a lot of misinformation going on right now in social media around this pandemic. I don't know if you've picked this up. A lot of misinformation right now. Some people are calling it an infodemic, right? Why? Well, people pass it on because they don't know it's misinformation, right? Well, why? Why don't they know it's misinformation? Because the information they're reading is confirming their own biases, right? Well, why? Why would they do this? Well, people are unaware of their implicit biases. Well, why are people unaware of their implicit biases? Well, they've never been taught. So maybe a solution to misinformation that we can engage our students in, and they can then pay it forward and engage others in, is to teach news literacy skills that teach people how to consume, engage, and produce information. And again, let's go back to our little thing right here from our friends Joe and Joel, or as I like to call them, J squared, okay? Personally responsible citizen, when it comes to news literacy, what could people do? Well, we could maybe engage kids in consuming news from reputable sources. We can help kids identify their own implicit biases, maybe using a resource like Checkology from the News Literacy Project. How can we help kids be participatory citizens to address news literacy? Well, we can help them learn how to engage with sources to verify information and become a lateral reader, using sources like those from the Stanford History Education Project. And then how can we help them be justice-oriented citizens to get at the root causes? Well, we could teach them to be a wise producer of information, help them share wisely, and even how to inform others of misinformation. And there's a resource called Educating for Democracy Deep Dive, Preparing Youth in a Digital Age that I've hyperlinked there, that share tools and tricks to help students do that. Now, I've just touched the surface of tools that you could use to help engage student voice during a pandemic and beyond, but there's even more in the Google Drive folder that I guess if you're nice to Joe, he will share with you, okay? Now, again, if you look at, and I looked this up because I thought it would impress Joe, if you look at Education in Maine's guiding principles, you can see that everything we've been talking about in the last 45 minutes really aligned with the guiding principles of education in Maine. You know, if we engage students to be civic actors, to give them agency, not just for when they turn 18, but right now, we're giving them tools to be clear and effective communicators to others and also others in power. We're giving them the tools to be lifelong learners, to prepare them for civic life. We're helping them be creative and practical problem solvers, integrative and informed thinkers, all to the end of number 4, to be responsible and informed citizens. So with that, I'm just going to pause here. Do you guys have any questions or anything before we sort of share some of the last ideas? Did I leave you all speechless? I should just drop the mic right now?
I'm always speechless whenever I get to hear from you, Mary Ellen, so there's that.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm not sure if I can even begin right now.
Okay, it's a lot to process.
Yes, there's so many things right now in particular that I wish we could help address with students and adults.
Yeah. And all of these tools you as well, I've seen used by staff in professional development. Like, we have this issue in our school with attendance. Let's use the root cause tree to get at the root of this attendance issue. Or, you know, what are the things we as teachers can do? What are the policies that need to be changed? So these are tools not just for students, but for you as well to use in professional development, as maybe you get together with your colleagues to reflect on this experience. I'm going to share my contact information after this as well. So if you have so many questions and you want to reach out, I'm happy to Zoom with you one-on-one or respond via email. Okay?
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Sure. Now, let me just share a couple of things under the wire before we get going. One of the things that we're doing in Illinois to prepare teachers to teach civics is we have a micro-credential called the Guardians of Democracy program. And it's a 3-course series that's open to teachers all over the country. So while we develop this for teachers in Illinois, because I'm friends with Joe, you guys can participate in these micro-credentials as well if you're interested. It's a 3-course series. The first course that's open in June is going to be on current and controversial issue discussions. And actually, Paula McAvoy, who's going to be on with Joe later this afternoon, is featured in that first course. Then we also have a course that will be debuting this summer in teaching with simulations. And then finally this fall, what we've been talking about today, service learning through informed action. And again, they're all hosted on Free for Teachers Canvas. It comes with resources, how-to guides, and we also specifically talk about how you can iterate these proven practices of civic education, not only face-to-face in a classroom, but in a digital format as well. And if that's something you're interested in, if you go to guardiansofdemocracyteachers.org, guardiansofdemocracyteachers.org, you can find out some more information. And with that, you can follow me on Twitter. I use the hashtag #CivicsInTheMiddle, and my handle on Twitter is @Daniels_M. And my email is right down below there, which is hard to see, but you'll be able to see it in the slide deck there.
I don't see it.
I think it's, let me do this. How about that? Can you see it now?
Yes, now it's on. Thank
All
you.
right. Ooh, and look, we have a chinchilla. I've never heard of that. A rox and a bat with us today, so that's exciting.
So thank you, Mary Ellen. I did put everybody's contact hour, the link for the contact hour form in the chat box. And as people are taking a look at that, I did earlier, just a little bit ago, put in your links. I held off. Mary Ellen, you kept talking about that they'd get access to the Google Drive, but I know how people are, right? You give them the links, then they disappear. So I tried to wait till the end. So how did I do? Did I oversell her, or did she meet all the expectations? Because I think that she's... And Mary Ellen, I believe that I'm going to have to be extending at least another week of PD in June. So if you were serious about wanting to come back, I will send you that form again. Look for me to be putting on Facebook the call out for more professional learning on that. So
you're going to go for 200 archived videos? Is that what we're going for now?
We're going to work for something here.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
What we have Mary Ellen online, does anybody have any questions? Anything you'd like to ask? Well, Mary Ellen, let me formally then give you our biggest thank you from here in Vacation Land, USA. Thank you for donating or giving up an hour of your time here to spend with us. So on behalf of all of our participants and people who would see this in the future, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my little informed action to sort of empower educators, right, with these tools to help their students, because I've seen my students blossom and grow. They have such wonderful creative ideas to impact their communities now, and I can't wait to hear the good reports coming from Maine.